ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we work together with vigor. May our study make us illumined. May there be no dislike between us. Om, peace, peace, peace. ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। यथाग्निर्दाहिका शक्तिः रामकृष्णे स्थिता हि या सर्वविद्यास्वरूपां तां शारदां प्रणमाम्यहम्। नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। With salutations to the all-pervading Divine Spirit and Shri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi and Swami Vivekananda, I welcome you all to the Universal Brotherhood Day 2016. As you know, with this day we begin our fall season, say goodbye to the summer vacation, and there is some more significance for this celebration. One is that Swami Vivekananda delivered his landmark speech, bringing all different faiths together at the Parliament of Religions with his that special words which you will soon hear. And so I am not going to repeat them here. So to remember that event which happened on 11th of September, 9/11. These days we remember 9/11, of course, for a different reason. But 9/11 was known before that to be the Universal Brotherhood Day because of the speech of Swami Vivekananda on that day. Parliament of Religions in 1893 in Chicago was organized specially for this purpose, that let us bring all the different religions on one forum. And the spirit of that that purpose was manifest in Swami Vivekananda's address there. Then another reason is that this particular Vedanta society was also started on this second Sunday of September in 1928. So therefore we decided to observe this second Sunday of every September as the day we shall begin our activities after the summer break. So the purpose also is understated of this organization, that this is for showing how all different religions through various paths are approaching the same goal, and therefore we should help each other. We should come together to make each other's journey to the same one goal by different paths, more and more comfortable, more and more powerful too. And we therefore choose for this particular event a theme, a topic that is relevant to all different religions. And this year we have chosen the topic of emphasizing spirituality. Many of you are familiar, especially those who move in the university circles, that most students these days prefer not to say that they are religious. They say they are not religious, but they qualify. Don't think that we are just atheists. We are not religious, but we are spiritual. And we need to understand what this spiritual part of our life is, and why as religious entities, religious groups, we need to emphasize this in our religious practices. That the core of all religious practice is to meet the divine presence face to face. The experience of the divine is the essential core of it. Let me quote Swami Vivekananda. This is a quote from his lecture given in London in 1896, and it is published in the book form along with many other lectures. The volume is titled Jnana Yoga, and the title of this particular talk is Immortality. Not Realization. Immortality, that talk comes later in the same book. Realization. So, and let me quote why we should become more attuned to spiritual pursuit in and through our various different religions. And I quote here, "Our only hope then lies in penetrating deeper. The early thinkers discovered that the farther they were from the center, the more marked were the variations and differentiations, and that the nearer they approached the center, the nearer they were to unity. The nearer we are to the center of a circle, the nearer we are to the common ground in which all radii meet. And the farther we are from the center, the more divergent is our radial line from the others. The external world is far away from the center, and so there is no common ground in it where all the phenomena of existence can meet." This is one great idea to learn and to hold on to, this idea of realization. This turmoil and fight and difference in religion will cease only when we understand that religion is not in books and temples. It is an actual perception. Only the man who has actually perceived God and soul has religion. There is no real difference between the highest ecclesiastical giant who can talk by the volume and the lowest, most ignorant materialist. We are all atheists. Let us confess it. Mere intellectual assent does not make us religious. This is a very emphatic statement that we have to march towards the actual experience of God. Otherwise, all these external practices of religion, they are meaningless. And this is the message that Swami Vivekananda carried, commanded by his teacher Sri Ramakrishna, and brought it to the West. It is, and that song we shall now listen to. You can all join in singing too. That song we call Mission Song. And I request Kathleen Adams, she is from, and her friends, they are from Annisquam Village Church. Their pastor, Deirdre White, she is also going to speak in this symposium. And this song describes this whole journey, the mission of Swami Vivekananda. Kathleen, and all dear singers. The first speaker on this symposium today is Himayat Inayati, a wonderful Sufi teacher. Let me tell just a few words by way of his introduction. Himayat Inayati, MS DHD, has been traveling the Sufi path for 44 years, receiving the sacred transmission of Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan and Murshid Samuel Lewis. Himayat served as the international head of the Sufi healing order for 20 years. Presently, with his wife Shahida, he co-leads the Light of the Mountains Retreat Center in Leicester, North Carolina. He has taught in 14 countries and created Universal Awakening to foster an inclusive global community of seekers joining in discourse, events, and online classes. It was wonderful to have him, and those who were present in the retreat that he gave yesterday know how his wonderful communicative powers are. I request him to please come and address the gathering.
So I would like to thank Swamiji and all of his friends here at the Vedanta Center of Providence for inviting a stranger from a different tradition amongst their midst. I would also salute Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. I would also like to read something from Swami Vivekananda. And it is interesting to me that I was invited to come here today to speak on this wonderful occasion, celebrating his great speech in 1893. 9/11, excuse me. Because for several years, I suspect, since maybe 1974, I've had 4 of his little red books on my desk, which I have referred to from time to time. I've always had a very deep feeling for the inspiration that he came to share, and also for the inspiration that his teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, not only shared, but embodied throughout his life. In fact, for those of you who don't know, Sri Ramakrishna embodied the spiritual realization of all the great prophets of the one God in his life, which is an amazing thing to be able to say. And Vivekananda came at his behest to come to the West and to bring that realization and share it with all of us. And so he gave a speech. I'm going to read the last part of his speech. Much has been said of the common ground of religious unity. I am not going to just now to venture my own theory, but if anyone here hopes that this unity will come by the triumph of any one of the religions and the destruction of the others, to him I say, brother, yours is an impossible hope. Do I wish that the Christian would become a Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become a Christian? God forbid. The seed is put into the ground, and earth and air and water are placed around it. Does the seed become the earth or the air or the water? No, it becomes a plant. It develops after the law of its own growth, assimilates the air, the earth, the water, and converts them into a plant substance and grows into a plant. Similar is the case of religion. The Christian is not to become a Hindu or a Buddhist, nor a Hindu or a Buddhist to become a Christian. But each must assimilate the spirit of the others and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to his own law of growth. If the Parliament of Religions has shown anything to the world, it is this. It has proved to the world that holiness, purity, and charity are not the exclusive possessions of any church in the world, and that every system has produced men and women of the most exalted character. In the face of this evidence, if anybody dreams of the exclusive survival of his own religion and the destruction of the others, I pity him from the bottom of my heart and point out to him that upon the banner of every religion will soon be written, in spite of resistance, help and not fight, assimilate and not destruction, harmony and peace and not dissension. And this was in the late 1800s. It seems to me that in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, something marvelous was seeking to be birthed amongst us. It was not just Swami Vivekananda who came, but many great Buddhist teachers came to San Francisco at that time. And my own teacher, Hazrat Khan, actually came from the same country as Swami Vivekananda in 1910. And during that time also, the women's suffragette movement was born in its most strong and vital way. And also, during the same time, the League of Nations was birthed. Surely it was a great promise for humanity. And then we know also that soon after came World War I. My own teacher was asked, with all this great brotherhood, with all this great sentiment, with all this desire for harmony, how is it that we're in the midst of this war? And he said, there are things about life stronger even than humanity. This great sentiment that Swami Vivekananda brought touched the listeners in that room so much, as we know that they stood up and not just applauded him, but applauded him with enthusiasm. And enthusiasm in its original meaning, of course, means to be filled with God. What he is talking about strikes us deeply in our hearts. Our hearts know the truth of what he said. And our hearts represent the one heart that was speaking through him. The heart that has birthed us all. Each of us has access to that heart. When Swami Ji talks about coming face to face with the divine, the question is, what is a face? A face. Normally, I'm a very simple person in my own way and a slow learner. He said since whenever it was. I've been studying Sufism. And it took that long just to begin, I think. I keep thinking of a face. I see a human countenance, a face. So I'm waiting for God's face. But then I thought, well, what is a face? I've often been asked to give a memorial, to facilitate a memorial over a friend's death. And their body is lying there, of course, and I look, and that is not the face of my friend. It's clear, absolutely recognizable. That body, that is not my friend. That which came through that face, that countenance, that is the face. All those qualities of spirit that animated and communicated in so many ways. There was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania many years ago, Raymond Birdwhistle, who isolated 35,000 different facial expressions. each one which communicated something. Imagine that. We have 18 letters in the English alphabet, and we have 35,000 different facial expressions in America. He did American faces. So, who knows? Maybe in India it's 70,000. But the point is that the face is that which flows through and communicates what is there. And so where do we see this face of the divine? With what eye would we see this face? And all of the great spiritual traditions have said the same thing. It is through the subtle heart that we see the face of the divine. So it is being able to access our heart in the depth of our beingness that we come into touch, direct perception with the divine presence. And there is a distinction which the ancients knew when they talked about the intellect. They talked about it in three ways. Today, when we talk about the intellect, we talk about being overly cerebral. They say, Hamayat, you're getting too intellectual. So that means you're saying it in words too much. But the intellect of the ancients meant something different than just that which we call, what we think of as reasoning. It included that, but it also included the faculty of creative imagination. And deeper yet, it included the subtle heart. And they said that it was the subtle heart that had the ability to be present to the divine presence. So it was direct perception. The purpose of the mind that we call the intellect was to represent that to the best of its ability. But they said that the mind could never really do that, no matter how much it tried, because that which it seeked to represent was infinitely larger than any strictures that they would place upon it. Nevertheless, in Sufism, that is the pursuit. There is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. There are many hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. There's the Quran, and then there's the hadiths, and these are central to the Muslim path. In the hadith, this particular hadith, the followers come to the Prophet and they say, why did God create in the first place? And the Prophet replied, we were a hidden treasure and longed to be known. That was in the voice of the divine. We were a hidden treasure and longed to be known. And he also said, it was not easy in those days to disturb people and create a new proclamation of divine revelation. So there were these battles, literal battles where people died. But eventually, of course, the Prophet's side won, otherwise there wouldn't be the religion of Islam. And after they won, he gathered his followers together and he said, now that we have won the lesser jihad, it is time to fight the greater jihad, to take up arms and fight the greater jihad, which will be fought on the battlefield of the heart. So this is what it's all about, is when we talk about spirituality, when we talk about the spiritual path, we're talking about your heart. We're talking about your ability to traverse life through your heart. We're talking about the ability of you to be able to perceive life, true life, through the eye of your heart. And this is not just outer life, but it's also inner life. And why would there be a battle? What is the battle? Why not just direct perception? Well, in some ways we could say, well, it's the ego. We can blame the ego. We can blame the historical identity that gets accrued through existence on this planet of time and space. We can blame all kinds of creatures and all kinds of reasons. But ultimately, it is through limitation that we begin to truly appreciate the unlimited. It is through darkness and the interplay of darkness with light that we're actually able to see. There is an understanding in Islam that God comes to humanity and says, if I showed you my face completely, you would be annihilated. So, with its light. So, because it would just be sheer, absolute luminosity. Nothing to be seen. Nothing to be known. And yet, the divinity said, we were a hidden treasure and longed to be known, which is why we created life. So this path, this spirituality, is one in essence. And there is a concept in Sufism called perfection, even as it is in many other places, like Jesus himself said, be ye perfect. There is a concept, and it's called Insan Kamal, the perfected human. And a great Sufi saint, Ibn al-Arabi, said that there are two insans. There is the individual who is able to incorporate the divine perfections, embody the divine perfections. We could say that such an individual could be someone like Sri Ramakrishna, who embodied the divine message of unity as it was given and articulated by so many of the Divine One's messengers. We could say surely he would be somebody who embodied perfections. The perfection of Christianity, the perfection of Islam, the perfection of Hinduism, all of the great traditions within his own life. He didn't just talk about them, he lived them. He was in his very being them. So that is one individual. An individual can become an embodiment of the divine perfection. And then Ibn Arabi said there's a second Insan Kamal, and that is the totality of humanity. Thank you.
Many thanks, dear Himayat, for this spiritual presentation, taking us towards that unity, totality, two types of insaniyat that he was concluding his talk with. A really very important and profound idea. Thank you very much. Now we shall listen to two Sufi songs. Sufis are very good with music, and one comparatively recent Sufi, his name was Qazi Nazrul Islam. He lived in Bengal and composed songs for, there was no boundary of religions for him. He glorified the divine in various ways, but he went deep to the spiritual core. I request Rahul Rai to come forward to present one song, which quickly I will tell you the essence of it, that in the worship we burn an incense stick, and this Qazi Nazrul Islam is saying that, well, the incense stick is this body, my awareness of this body is the incense stick, and I have put the fire of the name of Divine Mother to it, and thus my life is now getting transformed. The whole fragrance of the incense stick has filled my whole being.
তত যত যাবে সুবাস তত ছড়িয়ে পড়ে চারিদিকে মা শ্যামা নামে লাগলো আগুন আমার দেহ দুঃখিতে ভক্তি আমার ধূপের মতো ভক্তি আমার ধূপের মতো ঊর্ধ্বে ওঠে অবিরত মা ভক্তি আমার ধূপের মতো ঊর্ধ্বে ওঠে অবিরত মা এই শিবলোকে দেবদেউলে মা শিবলোকে দেবদেউলে মার শ্রীচরণ পরশিতে পরশিতে লাগলো আগুন আমার দেহ দুঃখিতে অন্তর মোর শুদ্ধ হলো সেই রূপ সুবাসে অন্তর মোর শুদ্ধ হলো সেই রূপ সুবাসে ওরে মার হাসি মুখ চিত্তে ভাসে মার হাসি মুখ চিত্তে ভাসে চন্দ্র সম নীলাকাশে ওরে সব কিছু মোর পুড়ে কবে চিরতরে ভস্ম হবে না সব কিছু মোর পুড়ে কবে চিরতরে ভস্ম হবে মা মার হাসি চিত্তে ভাসে মার হাসি চিত্তে ভাসে চন্দ্র সব কিছু মন পুড়ে কবে চিরতরে ভস্ম হবে মা সব কিছু মোর পুড়ে কবে চিরতরে ভস্ম হবে ওই মার হাসি মুখ চিত্তে ভাসে চন্দ্র সম নীলাকাশে শ্যামা নামে লাগলো আগুন আমার দেহ দুঃখিতে যত জালে সুবাস তত যত জালে সুবাস তত ছড়িয়ে পড়ে চারিদিকে মা শ্যামা নামে লাগলো আগুন আমার দেহ ধূ
of Qazi Nazrul Islam will be presented by Shravani Bhattacharya. The translation of that song will be displayed there.
সুরের লহর তুলি আমি কাল নদীতে
What a touching description of the struggles that a sincere spiritual aspirant goes throughout the life. And through all these prayers, and sometimes feeling the divine touch, sometimes losing it, and so forth. Very beautifully described. And now we shall turn to the next speaker in our symposium, Pastor Deirdre White, pastor of the Annisquam Village Church, which is inseparably connected with the life of Swami Vivekananda and this whole Vedanta movement. It was at that church that Swami Vivekananda gave his first ever talk in America. And well, I don't have to elaborate on all that. Just let me tell a few words about Pastor Deirdre White, that she was raised as Presbyterian, and in her business life she became a corporate financial consultant. And then, as it is described on her website, on their website, that there was a leap of faith. Yeah, all of us wait, a moment comes, leap of faith. And then she decided to go into the search of the divine, joined the theological seminary at Princeton, and for last some years now she is a very popular pastor, very much liked by the congregation there, pastor at the Annisquam Village Church. If you you would like that church, very beautiful picturesque surrounding in the North Shore area. So I request her to give her presentation.
I'm very happy to be here. Swami Y invited me to come here 6 months ago, and I thought it would be a wonderful thing to do given the history of the relationship between our church and Swami Vivekananda and all Vedanta societies and all the Swamis who have come to visit us at the Annisquam Village Church. Some of you may have been at the celebration 3 years ago when we all gathered to celebrate that long-standing tie. So thank you very much. If I had a dime for every time someone has described themselves as spiritual but not religious, I would be much, much richer, but have perhaps little understanding of what people mean when they say spiritual, because they mean so many different things. And so the subject of this conference, the infinite subject of emphasizing spirituality, raised the question yet again. You must admit it is unlikely the subject emphasizing religion would be as attractive, as Swami pointed out, especially to those who are more comfortable with the implied malleability and even intentional ambiguity of the word spirituality. The word religion has come to be associated with beliefs and unthinking and exclusive adherence to creeds, some interpreted in ways that cause violence and arguments, separation and misunderstanding. And who wants to be part of that? However, I would like to remind everyone here that to the best of my knowledge, there is no sacred text which demands you leave your brain at the door of your worship space. Now, when I hear people speaking about being spiritual, as many who are also religious do, what I hear is a longing a longing for more connection, more meaning, aliveness, and relationship with something that is greater than themselves, with a power which can do what we cannot. Now, we no longer need gods or God to explain the weather, eclipses of the moon, sun, fertility, shooting stars, earthquakes, and floods. And hopefully we are wise enough to know that God does not directly cause suffering and death. As painful as these experiences are, with their heartfelt and understandable crying out for answers to those things which may be unanswerable. Yet God is always present with those who suffer. And in our searching, aren't we willing to go to the ends of the earth? A mission trip to Guatemala, an ashram in India, a retreat in the Rockies or the high desert of New Mexico, the outback of Australia for walkabout. In a couple of weeks, my cousin and her daughter are walking the length of Camino de Santiago, a traditional Christian pilgrimage which now welcomes all seekers. Now, these are wonderful insights when we can go to these places, and they are to be cherished in adventures and places like these. And we try so hard to take them home with us, don't we? You may be more successful than I am in keeping the spirituality of the mountaintop alive in the trenches of everyday life. What if we stood where we are and looked around using all our senses instead of traveling? Because ironically, the last place we look, as I discovered yet again this summer, is right under our feet. Barbara Brown Taylor writes, "No one longs for what he or she already has, and yet the accumulated insight of those wise about the spiritual life suggests that the reason so many of us cannot see the red X that marks the spot is because we are standing on it. The treasure we seek requires no lengthy expedition, no expensive equipment, no superior aptitude or special company. All we lack is the willingness to imagine that we already have everything we need. The only thing missing is our consent to be where we are." Taylor is an Episcopalian priest. Barbara Brown Taylor is an Episcopalian priest who left the church to teach world religions at a small southern college. She was once invited by what she calls a wise old priest to come to his church in Alabama. And of course she asked what he had in mind. "Come tell us what is saving your life now," he said. She writes, "It was if he had swept his arm across a dusty table and brushed all of the precious antique china onto the floor." Talk about what is saving your life now. Look down at the red X under your feet and tell us about it. What is it that your life depends on now? Our answers to this question change. They must, if we are to grow spiritually or otherwise. We live a protean existence in many ways, shaped and reshaped by local context, our relationships, the buffeting forces of technology and global conflict. They form the kinds of questions we ask at any particular moment in time. As the religious or spiritual family tea service finally clatters to the floor, pushed by the need to reframe our religious and spiritual longings, the need to consent to where we are. The table is cleared for revaluation, for fresh thinking, and maybe even relief, especially if we have the gift of sabbatical time to identify consciously and unconsciously what it is that could save our lives. Saving our lives is, I believe, what God had in mind for the Sabbath. That gift has been mine for the past 9 weeks. For the past 7 years, I've been the pastor of the community church on Cape Ann in Annisquam, and I have to tell you, I'm being absolutely honest, I crawled through the last few months before my sabbatical was to begin. I hoped it would be the answer to the profound weariness, the spiritual fatigue I was experiencing. And so on July 3rd, after the 5th wedding and 3rd funeral of that month, I packed my bags, locked up the parsonage, and left Annisquam for 3 months of rest. I had no master plan. I had collected a pile of books I had not had time to read and put them in a box in the car. There were a few things on my schedule. We moved house in the middle of the 2nd week. A couple of people I wanted to spend time with, including my husband, who I hadn't seen much of for at least 6 months. A trip to Canada, and a week with close family. No special retreats, no continuing education, nothing heady, just rest. And I now realize, a hungry openness to whatever happened to cross my path. Of course, I was hoping for some sort of spirit-driven energy to reseed my parched imagination, but hadn't the slightest idea how or if that would happen. And now, with only 23 days left before I return to an already full schedule in October, people do wait until you return to schedule baptisms, weddings, funerals, fundraisers, and other surprises. I would like to share with you some of the things, as the wise old priest said, that are saving my life. Now, all faiths have embodied expressions, rituals, singing, dancing, forms of meditation, spoken word, and we discount those at our peril. Christianity is particularly a religion of flesh and blood, of the embodiment of the holy in the incarnation, in the faith that God came among us in Jesus Christ, showing us the way, God's way, of compassion and of justice and of faithful living. Historically, we have done a very good job of denying the implications of incarnation for earthly life. My Protestant ancestors were people who relegated the body to inferior status, much like their pre-Augustinian philosophical ancestor, Plato. Layered over that was the Enlightenment, the Cartesian elevation of the mind over the body, or even emotional life. I think, therefore I am. Protestants spend a lot of their time in their heads, and it's not always a healthy place to be. And my headlamp was flickering from way too much use. So while I thrive on intellectual engagement, there was nothing much I wanted to discuss. Instead, after we finished the move, I began to walk. I began to carry my body intentionally. I began to walk down our lightly traveled road to the nearby beach, where one can explore for miles along the protected waters of the shores of the Nauset Inlet. On the other side is the open Atlantic. And I started noticing what was under my feet. I stepped aside. I started noticing my feet and my physical relationship with the world unfolding without any help from me right around my feet. All of my senses became fully engaged again. And I began to immerse myself in the life of the shore, the marshes, the fox who lives in the brush, the well-nourished coyote that wanders the nearby conservation land. I tried to emulate the great blue heron with his waving beard of feathers, who stands so still, one-legged in the marsh, eyes on the water, waiting patiently. Like Moses, instead of hurrying by, I would stop and turn aside to see the marvelous bush. And by paying attention, encounter the things that are saving my life. When I awake, not so early in the morning, I am surrounded by spruce and cypress and maple, like living in a tree house. And since we are on a bluff, there is usually a breeze that I can hear, encouraging the trees to whisper a song. And when it is blustery like it was this morning, it is an invitation to sit out on the deck and watch what the clouds are doing and telling me about the future. I have only visited 2 churches, both during a 5-day sojourn with my family who live in Canada. One to lead the memorial service of a much-loved uncle, and the other was a visit with my mother's youngest sister, who wanted to show me the little Anglican church in the woods near her beloved lake, where she would like to be laid to rest. The service was conducted by their new priest, a Hungarian ex-Jesuit. Listening to his accented voice brought back happy memories of a trip I took 2 years ago to Eastern Europe and to Budapest. When the Holy Eucharist began, I watched as he raised the large wafer, which reminded me of a perfect sand dollar, and then the chalice, and found myself enchanted by the earthy, embodied nature of this ritual, even though I have led it hundreds of times. This sacrament first celebrated by Jesus and his followers as the Passover meal. And as people came forward, the mantra, the words, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven, floated in the air. It was a mantra of sacrifice and compassion. And after my turn, I sat, eyes closed, listening. The body of Christ, the bread of heaven, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven, repeated again and again until it became music, a chant of life, enveloping me in its prayerful rhythm and saving my life. I have read a dozen books, novels that spark my recovering imagination. Oh, there's a story idea. There's a sermon idea over there. That's when I know my mind is starting to turn over again. Yeah. Especially a book called The Little Paris Bookshop. Has anybody read that? The Little Paris Bookshop. It's written by a French woman in German and translated into English. A story of embodied loss, of grief, of healing and recovery, which took my breath away and gave it back again, but fuller. And then a book called The Soul of an Octopus. Has anybody read that? Drew me into the world of a creature I didn't know much about, and opened a window into the developed consciousness of these mysterious, intelligent, 8-armed invertebrates who were named Octavia, Kali, and Karma, who lived at the New England Aquarium. And on Friday, we'll be traveling to Baltimore and plan to head to their magnificent aquarium, and when I return, to the site of the book in Boston. And my acquaintance with the octopus further led me to investigate the controversial Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, published in 2012 by a group of scientists, including Stephen Hawking, which asserts that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness, and that non-human animals, including all birds and mammals, and many other creatures, including octopuses, also possess these neurological substrates. This was a different sort of confirmation of the ongoing experience of my sabbatical journey. While the language is technical, neurological substrates, the meaning is something I have experienced on the beach and in the marshes, the mud and the sand, and would extend to enfold the trees and the Eucharist, the fox, the coyote, the raccoon my little dog treed, who peered down at us with his perfect black mask, and birds. I think especially birds. No, it's not bad to hear that we're descended from birds. It is the season of the shore migration on Cape Cod, and now mostly empty beaches are stopover points for the journey south. At the Audubon Sanctuary in Wellfleet, there are flocks of egrets, great and snowy, yellow legs, tiny snipers. I mean, not snipers, sandpipers, plovers, all kinds of them. Blue herons and their cousins, the night herons. And some juvenile, some mature, some with striking colors, and others well camouflaged. They are not a raucous bunch. Actually, they're pretty quiet, unless the crows get going, or a laughing gull's harsh giggle interrupts the scene. They fill up on fiddler crabs and small fish to prepare for the long flight ahead. My husband gave me a pair of binoculars as an early birthday present so I could take it all in. Now, I could write an essay about each of these graces, and perhaps someday I will, and there are a lot more. But now what will I take with me of all these wonders which are saving my life? When I return to a life filled with schedules and deadlines and traffic and expectations, when I am the one offering the Eucharist to others, will I still hear that rhythmic chant, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven? I will remember the waving marsh grass at twilight, copper, green, gold, and pink, transforming into dark silhouettes against the deepening blue sea and the fading brilliance of the sky. And I will breathe. I will hear the call of migrating shorebirds, feel the prickly but sweet touch of the new roses in my garden, the taste of the sea as it comes to my mouth on a humid day. And I will turn aside wherever I happen to be and look at what the divine is calling me to see. Will I call it spirituality? Probably not. In the end, naming something can limit it. And there is no limit to what the divine has to show us right in front of our faces. Amen.
Many thanks, Deirdre, for this really sublime exposition, very poetic, and that she refused to name it even as spirituality, because naming will not make it spiritual enough, It will limit it. So, a wonderful idea. Thank you very much. Now we shall have a singing and then later a dance, singing the song, We Are One in the Spirit. The leader for this song is again from the same church, Anisquam Village Church. Kathleen Adams, she will lead the song.
I'll be performing a dance form called Kuchipudi, which is born in the same village named called Kuchipudi. It's in southern part of India called Andhra Pradesh, that's the state. This evening I'll be performing the Sivashtakam. It's in praise of Lord Shiva, who gave his half body to goddess Parvati, who has Ganga on his head, and who is wearing the skulls like garland and the snake as an ornament. Hope you all enjoy, and thanks one more time for Swamiji and Vedanta Society for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Hatta dhim dham, tat dhikita tunga na hatta dhim dham, nangi kita tunga jum jum, kita tunga dhim dhim, kita tunga dhutta kita tunga jum jum, kita tunga dhutta kita tunga dhim dhim, kita tunga ta hatta dhadata, dhanam dham dhadata ta hatta dhadata. Dhanam dham dhadata 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 dhimitata tarigadata dhadata dhadata dhimitata tarigadata dhadata dhadata dhimitata tarigadata.
Prabhum prananadham vibhum vishwanadham jagannathanadham sadananda bhajam. Prabhum prananadham vibhum vishwanadham jagannathanadham sadananda bhajam. Bhavatbhavya bhuteshwaram bhutanadham shivam shankaram shambhumi sanamide. Bhavatbhavya bhuteshwaram bhutanadham shivam shankaram shambhumi sanamide. Kalerum dhamalam dhanam sappa साधिपालं गणेरुन्धमालं तनोसर्पजालं महाकालकालं गणेशाधिपालं जटाजूटगङ्गोत्तरङ्गैर्विशेष्यं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे जटाजूटगङ्गोत्तरङ्गैर्विशेष्यं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे मुदामाकरं मण्डलं मण्डयन्तं महामण्डलं भस्मभूषाधरन्तं मुदामाकरं मण्डलं मण्डयन्तं महामण्डलं भस्मभूषाधरन्तम् अनादिह्यवारं महामोहमारं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे अनादिह्यवारं महामोहमारं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे वटाधो निवासं महाट्टहासं महापापनाशं सदा सुप्रकाशम् वटाधो निवासं महाट्टहासं महापापनाशं सदा सुप्रकाशम् गिरीशं गणेशं सुरेशं महेशं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे गिरीशं गणेशं सुरेशं महेशं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे गिरीन्द्रात्मजासं गृहीतार्थदेहं गिरौ संस्थितं सर्वदा सन्निगेहम् गिरीन्द्रात्मजासं गृहीतार्थदेहं गिरौ संस्थितं सर्वदा सन्निगेहम् परब्रह्म ब्रह्मादिभिर्वञ्चमानं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे परब्रह्म ब्रह्मादिभिर्वञ्चमानं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे कपालं त्रिशूलं कराभ्यददानं पदाम्भोजनं रायकामन्त्रदानम् कपालं त्रिशूलं कराभ्यददानं पदाम्भोजनं रायकामन्त्रदानम् बलिवर्धयानं सुराणं प्रधानं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे बलिवर्धयानं सुराणं प्रधानं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे सरश्चन्द्रगात्रं गणानन्दपात्रं त्रिनेत्रं पवित्रं धनेशस्य मित्रम् सरश्चन्द्रगात्रं गणानन्दपात्रं त्रिनेत्रं पवित्रं धनेशस्य मित्रम् अपर्णाकळत्रं सदा सच्चरित्रं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे अपर्णाकळत्रं सदा सच्चरित्रं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे हरं सर्पहारं चिताभूविहारं भवं वेदसारं सदा निर्विकारम् हरं सर्पहारं चिताभूविहारं भवं वेदसारं सदा निर्विकारम् श्मशाने वसन्तं मनोजं दहन्तं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे श्मशाने वसन्तं मनोजं दहन्तं शिवं शङ्करं शम्भुमीशानमीडे स्वयं यः प्रभाते नरः शूलपाणि पठे स्तोत्ररत्नं इह प्राप्य रत्नम् स्वयं यः प्रभाते नरः शूलपाणि पठे स्तोत्ररत्नं इह प्राप्य रत्नम् स्वयं यः प्रभाते नरः शूलपाणि पठे स्तोत्ररत्नं इह प्राप्य रत्नम् सुपुत्रं सुधान्यं सुमित्रं गणत्रं
विचित्रै समाराध्य मोक्षं प्रयाति सुपुत्रं सुधान्यं सुमित्रं गणत्रं विचित्रै समाराध्य मोक्षं प्रयाति
Dimmitda, dimmidda, dhankidda, dimmidda. Dim dimmidda, dimmidda, dhankidda, dimmidda. Da ghatta dhanada. Dhanam, dhan dhadada, da ghatta dhanada. Dhanam, dhan dhadada, kum dhatta, kidda, dhadita, kum dhatta, kidda, dhadita, dham. Takum dhatta, kidda, dhadita, dham. Takum dhatta, kidda, dhadita, dim, dhadita, dhaka, dim, dhadita, dhaka, dim, dhadita, dhaka, da, da, da. Dim dhadita, dhaka, dim, dhadita, dhaka, dim, dhadita, dhaka, da, da, da. Dim dhadita, dhaka, da, da, da. Dim dhadita, dhaka, da, da, da. Dhanata, dhanata, dhanam, padhata, dhanata, padhata, dhanam, padhata, dhanata, padhata, dhanam, padhata, dhanata, dhadivi, dhimita, dhimi, dhadivita, dhimi, kirti, dhankirti, dharkirti, dhankirti, dharkirti, dhankirti, dharkirti, dharkirti, dhadhitta, dhajam, dhadigiddata, dhitta, dhajam, dhadigiddata, dhajam, dhadigiddata, 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 dhadhitta, dhajam, dhaka, dhadigiddata, dhitta, dhajam, dhaka, dhadigiddata, dhajam, dhaka, dhadigiddata, dhaka, dhadigiddata, dhaka, dhadigiddata, dhadhitta, dhajam, dhaka, dhikka, kirti, dharkirti, dhitta, dhajam, dhaka, dhikka, kirti, dharkirti, dhajam, dhaka, dhikka, kirti, dharkirti, dhaka, dhikka, kirti, dharkirti, dhaka, dhikka, kirti, dharkirti, dhitta, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, kirti, dharkirti, dhum. Dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, dhaka, dhitta, kirti, dharkirti, dhum. Dhitta, dhaka, dhaka, dhitta, dhim, 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 dhaka, dhaka, dhim, dhaka, dhaka, dhim, dhaka, 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 dhum, dhaka, 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 dhum, dhaka, 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 dhum, dhaka, dhum, dhaka, dhum, dharkirti, dhum.
Very beautiful presentation in dance. The spirituality can be expressed in various ways. It is not only just sitting in meditation, but in so many different aspects of life one can manifest the spiritual wisdom. All the forms of arts, all the forms of our work can become vehicles for the manifestation of spirituality. So, thank you very much, Prafulla. Next is the third and in a way the last speaker of this symposium, that is Rabbi Barry Dollinger. When I was looking for somebody who is well versed in the Jewish spiritual tradition of Kabbalah, and one of my friends, he suggested your name. Rabbi Barry Dollinger grew up in North Baltimore, a small suburb on the south shore of Long Island. Not Baltimore, Bellimore, sorry. He graduated from Memphis High School and continued on to the University of Pennsylvania, where he received his BA, majoring in political science and minoring in Near Eastern studies. Rabbi Dollinger studied in Yeshivat Native RA in the old city of Jerusalem in order to pursue religious interest and studies. Upon returning, he studied law at Fordham Law School in New York, where he received his JD in 2011. He also attended the Rabbi Isaac Elshman Theological Seminary, affiliated with Yeshua University, where he received Semisha in 2011. During his time in Semisha, Rabbi Dollinger served as rabbinic intern at Congregation Adareth El in Manhattan and as rabbinic intern at the Beth Den of America. He taught Jewish studies at the Strayer Herbio Academy and serves as a member of the Board of Trustees at the Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island, a Holocaust Education and Resource Center of Rhode Island, and the Jewish Community Day School of Rhode Island.
Swami, thank you so much, and to the entire Vedanta Society and for everyone for coming today. The spirit in the room is efficacious, and It's very positive and light and warm in many ways. I heard something recently. Hamayati was speaking about the face of God. What does the face of God look like? And I heard an interpretation of a verse in the Torah that I'd never heard before. One of the 3 priestly blessings that the ancient priests of Israel used to give is that God should lift his face, upon you. And so I was learning from a teacher who said, what happens when we lift our faces? That's a smile. And then he said, may you have permission at this moment to see the source of life greeting you with a smile. However our moods are, we're not always happy. We're not always smiling. But what if we had permission to see the present moment as a kind of smile? That's actually what this means, to lift the face. And I thought it was a remarkable interpretation. I have no idea if it's true. I don't know if that's what it means, but it's profound. And so perhaps that's one way the face of spirituality manifests, is seeing the present moment as a friend or smiling. I wanted to introduce 3 concepts, different concepts, which I think can help in our spiritual quest. And I want to tell you why these concepts. Spirituality, we've been discussing, it's great, it's wonderful to have meaning in life. That was one of the things mentioned. To have connection. These are all deeply important in our society, where we walk around never alone. Solitude is something that we don't have anymore. There are a number of books talking about how we have to create solitude because we no longer have solitude, because even just phones in our pockets, feeling them vibrate, and our minds are drawn elsewhere to others. And so we're constantly connected, but we're totally lonely also. There's never been a moment, I think, that a society has been as lonely, perhaps, as Western society, even with all of the constant connection. And when we pursue spiritual aims, it's so easy to get caught up in our own version of that and to pervert it really quickly. And so instead of understanding these things as sources of connection, they very easily become sources of ego and division. We take this teaching, and this is my teaching, and perhaps your teaching is different, and perhaps your teaching is wrong, and perhaps my teaching is better, and then perhaps there's conflict. Right? And so it goes very easy from sources of meaning and connection to sources of conflict and division, because that's what we do with anything. We're people, and that's just how it is. So I wanted to share 3 concepts which I think can help sort of keep things in perspective. How we can pursue spirituality in basically a secular world. But how also that quest can be one that is balanced for us and in check so that it keeps us in a healthy place. The first concept from the Jewish mystical tradition is something called Shvirat HaKelim. I'll try not to use too much Hebrew. Forgive me if I do. I'm used to it. It means breaking of the vessels. And this was a metaphor by Rabbi Luria, one of the great Jewish mystics. And the metaphor goes something like this. When God created the world, poured light into vessels. That's what happened. It's a metaphor. But the vessels shattered. They couldn't hold the light. And the broken shards are everywhere, and it's our job to find the broken shards of the vessels and to repair them, to repair the world. Just go into this a little bit more. What does it mean that the vessels broke? Why did the vessels break? Why couldn't they contain the light? And this is a metaphor for us. And so Jewish mystics teach they couldn't contain the light because they couldn't give off light. They could only receive. And so something we learn deeply from this metaphor, built into the very fabric of being, is that being is an exercise of breathing in and breathing out, of receiving and giving in balance, of receiving and giving. So this is the first very powerful concept, that if we can't contain the light, we won't be able to contain the light if we can't give off our own light. But if we only give off our own light and we don't receive the light, we run empty. This is one of the things that happens with 24-hour news. I think it's very real. All day long there have been images playing of sort of incredibly painful and violent scenes of human beings falling off of buildings and people being incinerated alive, right? And And we watch these things, and there's a limit to our human ability to have empathy and concern. And so we begin to watch these things without an emotional reaction at a point. Because who has that kind of emotional capacity to constantly watch, and not just there, but in Syria and the tremendous violence going on around the world. And so we learn by accidental habit not to have empathy or concern. And so we need to find ways to breathe in, to receive light, so that we can give light, and so that we can participate in harmony in this sort of chain, and so that others can receive what we breathe out, and perhaps give back to us as well. And so it's vertical and it's horizontal. This is a deep challenge. In order to do this, we need to carve out time. That's one of the main challenges of the modern world. We need to carve out time to listen and time to breathe. In order to do this and even have a sense that maybe we're out of balance. Because if we're not listening and we don't even know, do I have empathy now? Do I have concern? Am I feeling agitated? We're not even aware, and so we need awareness. And it's a challenge. I struggle. I'm also coming off of a sabbatical this summer, and I went on a silent retreat, so I was coming back from a period of silence. I came into the schedule. Immediately, people began to pass away, and one day, 2 people passed away, and that's what happens, apparently. And I found myself again making a visit to a house, struggling to really feel the pain of the grieving family, because that's what happens. But at least I noticed. That was the change from sabbatical. I knew that I was going in, and I really didn't want to be in that place. But how do we carve out time just to foster our own sense of awareness so that we might better refine the balance? The breaking of the vessels, powerful metaphor. Are we breaking? And how can we put ourselves back together, receiving and giving? The second concept, which I think is useful for us from a Jewish perspective, is something called tzimtzum. It means to retract or withdraw. Basically says when there was only divine energy, there was no room for anything else. Like another concept that was mentioned earlier of just pure luminosity. That idea. So if it's just light, where is there anything else? And so the Jewish mystics taught that the first action of the divine was to withdraw, to create space. But how can that happen? If there's no divinity, what is there? And so most of the Jewish mystics understood. There was a debate. It's sort of, that's how it goes in Judaism. There's always a debate. Some say, no, that's part of the great mystery. God, as it were, really withdrew. There's a space devoid of the divine presence. But the more popular rendition says, no. Ki'ilu, as if. It's a metaphor, but don't take it to the extreme. The divine energy appears as if it withdrew. But there's still a reshinu, an imprint. And it's in that indent, that leftover imprint of divinity, that's what we have in our world. And so this truth recognizes something very profound, that God is, as it were, surrounding all of the worlds in Judaism, that the divine energy is beyond what we have here, that what we see is the proverbial tip of an iceberg, but that there's so much more than we can ever sense. And that grandeur and mystery inspires us to want more and to have an infinite quest and thirst that can never be filled, that words can't express, that art can't express, that song can't express. We just go on. But also the other end of that, which is very powerful, that divine energy doesn't just surround but dwells within, is integral to everything here, that our life spirit is a manifestation of divine energy, that we are all faces of the divine, that nature is a manifestation, a garment. As the mystics, the Jewish mystics say, Leit atar panoi mine, there is no place devoid of divinity. Rabbi Koch was the first chief rabbi of then British Mandatory Palestine in the early 1900s. Gave a beautiful teaching, which I want to share. You're looking at a flower. So what's the way, the spiritual way? The spiritual, emphasizing, what's the spiritual way to look at a flower, to smell a flower? He posited that most, at least Jews, would say the spiritual way to look at a flower, to smell a flower, is to recognize that there's a creator who created or maybe even continuously creates that flower. He says that's not right. That's not right. He says that's an intellectual exercise. But the real spiritual way to appreciate the flower, and maybe the exercise is good, is to smell the flower and to see the flower and to block out thoughts about how the flower got there or what power sustains the flower, because that occupies space that limits our perception and awareness of the beauty and the fragrance and the vividness of the colors of the flower. Divine energy dwells within. Dwells within. How can we recognize that? What practices can we cultivate that help us act in accord with that when we speak to someone else or when we interact with our natural environment or ourselves? This is the real power of Tzimtzum, that it's as if God withdrew to create, but there's still great divine energy and radiance even in this limited thing that we enjoy. It's the second concept I wanted to share. And I wanted to conclude with a related concept, one of yichud, of unification, something the Jewish mystics did as a practice that I think people are probably unfamiliar with. Most Jewish practitioners are unfamiliar with. It's a concept called unification, yichud. And it basically says, look, we dwell in a world of difference and distinction. And that's good. And we have to live in a sort of oscillation, back and forth. That's the task of a spiritual seeker, to understand that really, beneath this all, if there's one divine energy animating everything that is, that as we delve within, we wind up going up to a place where there is no more distinction, where distinction disappears. But the ideal, and this is maybe a possible pitfall of spirituality and its emphasis, the ideal is not to live in that place. The ideal is to be a frequent visitor, perhaps daily, but then to come back and to celebrate the distinction of others' lived experiences and what's happening here. To understand that it comes from one place, but it may manifest differently. It may even manifest in ways where there's actual discord or disagreement. That's okay too, but it comes from one place. And to understand that full diversity and to live with those poles is actually the true spiritual task. It's easy to be spiritual when you're in a room of people who agree. What about when there's deep disagreement? What's the spiritual response? Yichud, unification of distinct and perhaps polar opposites. How do we engage and move back and forth? And so these three concepts are concepts from the Jewish tradition I wanted to leave with, the breaking of the vessels, just to return to number one, of receiving and giving in balance and harmony, and carving out awareness to be able to even know where we are in that. Tzimtzum, understanding that the divine energy is so much more than what we can experience, but also reveling in the beauty of what we can experience, which is so much. It's as infinite to us as what's beyond. And unification. Unification. Not everyone the same, but appreciating diversity. I wanted to close with a classic Jewish practice, a practice, not just with a lot of, it's in the head, like people said. Even that, it's way too in the head. And that's wordless song. It's called nigun. Entertain it. Because wordless song, what does it do? It creates a space for us afterwards, but it also unites us in the moment when we sing and we're aware of our breath and the sound. And there aren't words, so it doesn't become complicated. We don't have to think about it. We can engage fully in the sound, and we engage with others in harmony. And so there are different things happening, different registers, voices, people, but they have to work together towards one aim. Perhaps that's the great thing that could happen with spirituality. So I'll try it. This one has two parts. So perhaps you can join in. Please join in, please. I don't have a very good voice, so if you don't, it may be painful, and I apologize in advance. So here's the first part. I'll sing it, and have you repeat, and then we'll try the second part, and then we'll try and put it together and see what that can do for us. So the first part goes like this, and forgive me again. Dai da dai 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 dam bai da da dam bai dai 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 hai da dai 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 hai nai ana nai dai. It's part one, so we'll give it a try. Ya da dai nai 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 bam hai da dam bai nai 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 hai nai ana nai dai. One more time. Ya da dam mai dam ma mam ma hai na 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 hai da na 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 hai na ya na na no. Here's the second part. Ya na 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 die 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 die. Bye na 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 na. We'll try it. Ya na na ya na na ya na na ya na na. Yam bye na 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 yam ma ya na na ya na 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 da da yan bye da da da. From the beginning, da 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 na 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 dum ba 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 dum ba dum ba na ya na na da ya da dum ba dum ba dum ba ma da dum ba dum ba yam ba ba dum ba dum ba dum ba na ya na na. Yanana, 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 hinana, na, 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 yanana, 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 na, na, hamba, yanana, no, hinana, yanana, 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 hiya, ya, ya, yanana, 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 na, na, hamba, yanana. Thank you all so much, and may the present moment smile at you, and each in your own way.
Thank you, Rabbi Barry Dollinger, for this beautiful explanation, or let us put it rather, a spiritual perspective of various ideas, and concluding with nice music. Now, there will be music by David Upegi and his companions. It's a celebrated song, Imagine.
We are part of a band called Infusion Evolution, and we play flamenco jazz, so this is not what we're going to do today, though. He said, make it a spiritual song, and I'm thinking, ooh, Cuban music and spirituality, it's only deep. You can't see it right away. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the song Imagine by John Lennon, but we're going to put a little flavor to it. And I do have some copies of the lyrics, and if you'd like to join us, that would be great. It's a pretty straightforward song. You know, it has a really good meaning, and the louder you sing, the better we sound. So might want to join us. Here we go. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. nothing to kill or die for, and no religions too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. No, I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join us, and we'll live as one. Live as one. As one. Oh, live as one. Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope John Lennon's okay with that. I know that's not what he intended, but we have to take it like that. Thank you so much.
We have amongst us Pravrajika Gita Prana, who manages the retreat center, that Vivekananda retreat at Ridgely Manor. She has been with Vedanta teachings right from her childhood, and gradually embraced this life of a nun in the line of Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda and Vedanta. She has learned from many, many great Swamis of our order, and I derive a lot of inspiration when I get a chance to meet her. And I am very thankful that she came at my request, and she will summarize the various talks and add her own flavor to it too.
Thank you. The truth of the matter is, Swami called me and said, will you come and talk, do the moderation? And I said, but we have a retreat going on at Ridgely. And he said, they won't miss you. So, and in a way, he's right. So, yes, it's my task to summarize what the speaker was saying, but Swami led me into a way in when he said that my quest and my Vedantic quest began when I was a child. It had an exact moment. And when Himayat was talking, I was remembering what it was that he said it's the face of the spirit and not the body, and talked about his friend who had passed away and he could see. That's exactly what happened to me when I was 12. My father passed away. He was a Russian Orthodox Christian, and my mother and her family were in the Vedantic tradition. And at his funeral, my aunt said to me,
well, you need to go and do the little ritual where you go in the line and pull an icon from the hands of the body and kiss it and put it back. And I said no. And she said, if you don't, I'll drag you. And I knew she would. And so I decided to do it, and I went up to the front, and that was my father's body there, and instantly I saw exactly what you said, that that's a body only. And the real heart, the real spirit is not there. And I wonder how many of the rest of you have had that experience. That it's so clear and it speaks better than any words could ever say. So that brings me to, it's pretty easy to sum up this set of wonderful speakers, because each in their own beautiful way has gone the same place. And starting with a certain, the same doubt about the overuse and of the word religion is now arising with the overuse of the word spirituality. And so I actually was thinking, well, I was going to talk about de-emphasizing spirituality, but I think you know what I would say just by listening to the previous three speakers, that true spirituality lies beyond any notion that we can have of it. That somehow it speaks to us in seeing that the body lying there actually is not what it appears to be, or walking on the beach with the birds, or in the wordlessness of nirguns, or niguns, sorry, and that any notion that we have of spirituality, while possibly being helpful, may also prove to be our downfall at the end. Because if there's something that these speakers were absolutely in agreement with, is that our so-called spiritual life is right here, right now. It's not somewhere else. It's not only on Saturday, it's not only on Sunday, it's not only on some kind of holiday that we all may celebrate. It's right here, right now, doing the dishes, or whatever we might have to be doing at the time. And that's what brought me, another thing that immediately arose to my mind was, I think it probably started with the beautiful and well-known Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi. The two lines immediately jumped to my head: the bandage place is where the light enters in. And I think it was Leonard Cohen that may have borrowed that thought, and everyone knows that little verse that he wrote. Let's see. Ring the bell that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's where the light flows in. And in each way, each speaker here has put that into words in a very beautiful and unique way. That the light isn't there. The light isn't, somewhere to be had. The light here is right now, right within our own heart. So Advaita Vedanta, of course, has its own notions about that. And I thought I'd throw them in. Immediately, Swami Vivekananda comes to mind. And my favorite saying of all that I'm constantly telling myself like a mantra, we have put our own hands over our own eyes and are crying, help me, it's dark. Just take away your hands. So our life should be the taking away of the hands, because nothing will be added to us in the end. That the way Advaita Vedanta will try to explain the same mystery as all three speakers were saying is a little bit differently than the shattered vessel, but exactly with the same spirit underneath. And Swami Vivekananda again illustrated it this way. Especially in India, where there are so many potters who throw clay pots on wheels and then they set them out in the sun to dry. Imagine, and please do this, imagine that there is a field of pots that are sitting there, and say like it was raining, and so the pots filled up with water. Now, if you went into that field and you looked into each pot and you saw the sun reflected there, would part of the sun be reflected in each pot? The whole sun would be reflected in each pot. So in this way, in some mysterious way that transcends any words, the whole of the divine is reflected in each broken fragment. Not part, but a whole. In other words, there's divinity in every single moment, no matter how trivial, no matter how sad, no matter how difficult, no matter how happy, no matter what. You know, you're driving your car, you're brushing your teeth. These are all paths to the light. And they actually are the light itself, and we're telling our story about how they're not. So in each speaker's way, told that story of walking on beaches, of seeing it reflected in the heart, of using these the beautiful three concepts of the breaking of vessels and the withdrawing as if, which by the way is we could recognize also as if is a wonderful terminology. And also the unification was the other unified message or talk that each one of these speakers spoke beautifully about, that they're underlying this beautiful multiplicity. There really is one light, one divine reality. You want to call it God, you want to call it the Mother, you want to call it Brahman, you want to call it whatever. Names won't go there, so you can call it whatever you like. That, or sometimes names should be held in such reverence that it takes you right to the edge, but still it requires an act of, or not even an act. One teacher that I know very well said, what all of our spiritual practices do, and this is in the language of, well, you'll see. What all our spiritual practices do, no matter what they are, at best, because they are acts, they're actions, and the divine is not the product of any act, that because they are actions, what they do is they take us to the doorway. And that's what that's our part in it. We need to keep ourselves in the doorway. We need to enter that mysterious area of the heart in whatever way that we can, where language won't go, where words won't go, where concepts won't go. But it's up to God, it's up to the divine, it's up to the Mother to open the door. We can't open that door because the divine is not the product of anything that we do or don't do. So in that way, each speaker has said, we need to, the light is the light, the divine, God is the ultimate, the essence of our being, and that's where our spirituality should go. And then in closing, I'll say just where we should be careful, though, that our spirituality should not go into judging our neighbor. That after, 30 years of being around spiritual groups of various kinds, it's very easy to pull out the measuring tape. And because minds naturally do that. And so we can blame it on the ego, we can blame it on whatever, but we have this tendency to say, oh, he's not spiritual enough. So that's one, if we find our mind doing that, it gives us an opportunity to ask ourselves, well, what do I think is spiritual enough? And remember that that's a way that we're holding our hands over our own eyes. That as we salute the holy ones, I also salute all of you, that I've made a practice. I'm not there yet, but I've made a practice, and the more I live, the more I see there really is no difference. The divine truly is in everyone, and each in its own way. And that this world, whether it's real, whether it's apparently real, whether it's sort of real, whether it's a simulation, is nothing other than that one. I used to ask, what is the purpose? Why? Why would the one become many? But I think if I was going to put it into language now, and it almost sounds blasphemous, if the goal is to be infinite, I mean infinitely manifest, we're living in a little tiny spectrum of a perfect being. But even then, I would say we have to remember that the word is a notion and the word being is a notion. And so, as all three speakers said, ultimately, all of these ideas, all of these words, the best we can do is use them as lovely paths, but we have to at some point drop those words and enter the space of silence and enter the space in the heart. And the best way we can do that, as everyone has reminded, is remembering that right here, right now, is your greatest opportunity. So thank you.
Many thanks, dear Gita Prana, for this beautiful summarization and excellent exposition of the goal. What we are to do is just to remove our hands covering the eyes, and the light is there. We are almost close to the program. The first song is going to give the method of taking these hands off. The action is to be done properly with the right method. These are some of the verses of Bhagavad Gita, the last 5 verses of the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, translated into English, and it was tuned by our friend who passed away a few years back, Joe Dwyer. That man God loves. And then, of course, you all can join in singing these. The tune is very simple and beautiful. Also, then we will end with the song Namaste. As Gita Prana was telling, that there is divine in everything. Everyone is divine. And the word Namaste actually means that. I salute the divine in you. And there, that will be the end song. The last, still there will be a culmination, and that is the prayer to Divine Mother with which we end almost all our program.
Hated not of all which lies, living himself benign, who looks upon none, yet never scots one, fixed in his faith divine. That man God loved, that man God loved, that against exempt from love of self, one
kind of a tradition around here. I think it kind of sums up. It sums up the spirit of Vedanta very nicely, I think. Please join in.